On a frigid winter night when the temperature had plummeted to 15 below zero and the wind howled like a wounded animal, a family of 5 slept peacefully in their farmhouse, unaware that their lives were about to be shattered by an electrical fire that had started in the walls of their century-old home. Their loyal German shepherd Max, who had been a part of their family for 8 years, lay at the foot of the youngest child's bed, his ears suddenly perking up at a smell humans couldn't detect, the acrid scent of smoke and burning wood that triggered something primal in his canine brain. If you believe in the extraordinary bonds between humans and animals, please subscribe to our channel now for more incredible stories that showcase the remarkable loyalty and courage our four-legged companions display. When it matters most, no one could have predicted what would happen in the next 17 minutes as flames engulfed the farmhouse and Max made a decision that would leave an entire community in tears and disbelief. The Thompson family had spent the evening like any other their farmhouse, a beacon of warmth against brutal Minnesota winter that raged outside. Robert had stoked the wood stove before bed, adding extra logs to combat the record-breaking cold front that had settled over Pine Creek. Sarah had double-checked that everyone had extra blankets. The old house with its charming character also had drafty corners and temperamental heating. 14-year-old Emma had been the last to go to bed, staying up to finish homework at the kitchen table, while 10-year-old Liam had fallen asleep reading comics with a flashlight under his covers. Little Zoe, just 6, had insisted on her nightly ritual of reading 2 stories with Max curled at her feet, his large body a comforting presence in her small bedroom. "Good night, Max, be a good boy," she had whispered, scratching behind his ears in the spot that made his back leg thump against the wooden floor in contentment, before drifting off to sleep. Clutching her favorite stuffed rabbit, Max had been with the Thompsons since before Zoe was born. Rescued from the county shelter where he'd been days away from euthanasia, Rabbit had gone looking for a working dog to help around their small farm, but instead had found the skinny 1-year-old German shepherd huddled in the back of his kennel, eyes wary but intelligent. The shelter workers had warned him that the dog had been found abandoned and might never fully trust humans. He had been wrong. From the moment Max had stepped into the Thompson home, he had transformed, becoming not just a pet, but a guardian, a companion, a member of the family who seemed to understand his purpose was to watch over these humans, especially the children. Emma and Liam had immediately adored him, taking turns throwing tennis balls and teaching him tricks. But it was with the arrival of baby Zoe that Max had truly found his calling, had stationed himself beside her crib from the first night home from the hospital, his ears pricking at her smallest whimper, his body alert even when exhausted. New parents, Robert and Sarah, finally managed to sleep. As Zoe grew from infant to toddler to little girl, Max's devotion had only deepened. He would position himself between her and any perceived threat, herded her away from the pond when she wandered too close, followed the school bus with his eyes each morning until it disappeared down the long country road. Family joked that Max wasn't a dog at all, but a furry angel assigned to protect their youngest. In this particular night, the temperature outside had continued to drop, pushing the aging electrical system of the farmhouse to its limits. The Thompsons had updated much of the wiring over the years, but sections of the original Nobin tube remained hidden in the walls of the century-old structure, a relic from when the house had first been electrified in the 1930s. Behind the kitchen wall, where a newer refrigerator drew more power than the original system had been designed to handle, the ancient insulation had begun to crack from decades of Midwest seasonal extremis. At precisely to 17 a.m., as the digital clock on the microwave silently marked the time, an almost imperceptible spark jumped between 2 exposed wires in the cavity of the wall. The spark itself might have died instantly, but it found purchase in a small nest of dried mouse bedding tucked between the wooden slats, a perfect tinder that began to smolder silently, filling the space between walls with an invisible danger. Max woke suddenly, his head lifting from his paws, ears forward, nostrils flaring the acrid scent registering in his sensitive nose. Long before any smoke detector would sound the alarm, he stood on Zoe's bed, turning in a circle, whining softly as he tried to identify the source of the smell. Little girl stirred but didn't wake, pulling her blanket higher against the cold. Max jumped down from the bed, padding to the closed bedroom door, his claws clicking softly against the wooden floorboards. He sniffed along the crack at the bottom, detecting the increasing strength of the burning scent, his body tensing with ancient instincts that recognized fire as one of nature's most dangerous. Threech returned to Zoe, nudging her small shoulder with his nose, then licking her face. When she didn't respond, she mumbled and turned over. Max's whine deepened, becoming more urgent. He pawed at the blankets, trying to pull them off, but Zoe only curled tighter against the cold. Dog moved to the door, scratching at the wood panel, his nails making sharp sounds against the grain. When that brought no response, he began to bark, a short, sharp sound he rarely made inside the house. The town had trained him well, knowing that a farm dog needed to understand when barking was a bet. Max paused, listening for movement in the silent house. When none came, he barked again, wind louder, more insistent. He could smell the smoke growing stronger, seeping through the old house's ventilation system, the fire spreading unseen behind the walls, feeding on dry timber and ancient insulation. As Max continued his desperate attempts to sound the alarm, his mind flashed back to the day Robert Thompson had first brought him home. The shelter had been loud, frightening, filled with the sense of fear and abandonment. Max had been there for weeks, passed over by families looking for puppies or smaller breeds. The workers had been kind, but he had understood. He was running out of time. Then the tall man with kind eyes had knelt outside his kennel, speaking in a low, steady voice. "Hey there, big guy. What do you say we get out of here?" And something in Max had known this human was different. This human could be trusted. This human meant safe. Tithe Thompson Farm had become his territory, his home, his purpose, the family, his pack to protect, and now that pack was endangered. In the kitchen below, unseen by any human eye, the first flames had begun to lick out from behind the wall. The ancient wood of the house, dry from decades of winter heating, providing perfect fuel. The fire grew silently, gathering strength before it would announce its presence with destructive force. Max abandoned his barking strategy, rushing back to Zoe's bed, jumping up and tugging at her pajama sleeve, with gentle teeth trying to pull her toward the door. When she only mumbled in her sleep, he let out a sound that was almost human in its frustration, a blend of whine and dashed back to the door, throwing his 80-pound body against it, the impact causing the door to shudder in its frame. He did it again, harder, this time the door swinging open, allowing him into the hallway where the smell of smoke was now unmistakable. Wisps of gray beginning to curl up the stairwell from the first floor. Max raced down the hall to the master bedroom, pushing against that door to barking with increasing desperation as the first audible crackling sounds of fire began to echo through the old farmhouses. Time for subtle warnings had passed. Now Max needed his humans awake, needed them to understand the danger lurking below, needed them to save themselves, and especially little Zoe, whose room was directly above the kitchen, where even now flames were beginning to illuminate the night with an unnatural flickering glow. Robert Thompson woke to the sound of frantic barking and something heavy throwing itself against his bedroom door through the fog of deep sleep. His first thought was annoyance. Why was Max making such a racket in the middle of the night? He reached for his phone, squinting at the bright screen. 2:24 a.m. He'd been asleep less than 3 hours. What's that noise? Sarah mumbled beside him, pulling the quilt higher. It's just Max. I'll see what's got him worked up. Robert swung his legs over the side of the bed, shivering as his feet hit the cold floor. The house always got chilly on nights like this, when the temperature plummeted below. Zaro shuffled to the door, yanking it open, prepared to scold the dog for the disturbance, but the words died in his throat as Max burst into the room, barking frantically, circling, and then running back to the hallway, only to return when Robert didn't follow. That's when Robert smelled its smoke, not the comforting scent of wood smoke from their stove, but the acrid chemical smell of something that should not be burning. Suddenly fully awake, he rushed into the hallway, where the smell was stronger, wisps of smoke now clearly visible in the dim nightlight. "Sarah, get up," he shouted, running back into the bedroom. "The house is on fire. Call 911. Sarah was instantly alert, mother's instinct overriding confusion as she grabbed her phone. "The kids," she said, already moving her voice tight with Feribert, raced down the hall to Emma's room, flinging the door open. "Emma, wake up. Now the house is on fire. We need to get out." The teenager sat up, confusion giving way to terror as she registered her father's words and the thickening smoke. "Dad," Liam called from the doorway of his room, already awake, rubbing his eyes, "get your sister and go downstairs now." Robert ordered, "Stay with your mother. Follow Max. He'll lead you out." Max had positioned himself at the top of the main staircase, barking sharply once, as if confirming this was the way to go. But as Robert turned toward Zoe's room, the dog suddenly growled, his posture changing. Robert took one step toward the stairs and understood why. Below them, the living room was transforming into an inferno, flames licking up the walls, consuming the family photos, the Christmas stockings still hanging from the mantel, the couch where they had all watched movies. Just hours before, the main staircase was directly above the kitchen where the fire had started and was now impassable, a wall of heat and flame. "Back," he shouted, pushing Emma and Liam away from the top of the stairs. "We can't go that way." Sarah appeared from their bedroom, phone pressed to her ear. 911 says fire trucks are coming, but they're 20 minutes out with the ice storm. Her eyes widened as she saw the flames below. "Oh God," Max barked again, sharply turning and racing down the hall toward the back of the house, where a smaller secondary staircase led down from the laundry area, a route they rarely used, but which might still be clear of fire. "Follow Max," Robert urged, gathering his family, pushing them ahead of him. Go. Emma grabbed Liam's hand, pulling her brother along. Sarah followed close behind, as Robert did a quick count. 1, 2, 3, 4. "Wait for." Ice flooded his veins as he realized Zoe wasn't with them. "Where's Zoe?" he shouted above the increasing roar of the fire. Sarah stopped, her face draining of color. "I thought she was with you. I was calling 911. I haven't gotten to her room yet," Robert said, already turning back. "Get them outside. I'll get Zoe, Daddy," Liam cried, reaching for his father. "Go with Mom now," Robert commanded Max. "Show them the way out," but Max wasn't listening. Instead, the shepherd had already turned, racing back toward Zoe's bedroom ahead of Robert, his mission clear. followed heart pounding against his ribs. The smoke growing thicker with each second, making it difficult to see to breathe. He pulled his t-shirt up over his mouth and nose. Max disappeared into Zoe's room as Robert staggered after Jim inside the small bedroom. The smoke was even thicker, pooling along the ceiling. Zoe was still in bed, seemingly asleep, her small form curled under blankets. Max stood beside her, pawing frantically at the covers. "Zoe, baby, wake up," Robert coughed, reaching the bed in 2 strides, scooping his daughter into his arms. Her body, limp head lolling against his shoulder. Terror gripped him. Was he too late? But then she coughed a small, weak sound that was the most beautiful thing he'd ever heard. She was alive, unconscious from the smoke. "But alive, good boy, Max," he gasped. "Now we get out." Carrie and Zoe. Robert turned back toward the door, but in the seconds he'd been in the room, the situation had deteriorated dramatically. Flames had begun to climb the wallpaper in the hallway outside, cutting off their return to the back stairs. The fire was spreading faster than he'd thought possible. The old dry wood of the farmhouse feeding the blaze. "Like kindling," Max growled, pushing against Robert's legs, urging him toward the window. The dog's instincts once again outpacing human reasoning. Robert staggered to the window, struggling to unlatch it one-handed while holding Zoe. Finally forcing it open, winter air rushed in momentarily, clearing the smoke, allowing him to think Zoe's room was above the covered porch. There was a sloped roof just below the window. It would be a difficult descent in the dark carrying a child, but possible. The alternative was unthinkable. "Max, go find Mom and the others," Robert ordered the dog, but Max stood firm, refusing to leave. A thunderous crash from downstairs told Robert part of the structure had given way. He had no more time to argue with the dog. Hoisting Zoe more securely in his arms, he climbed through the window onto the slippery porch roof, the bitter cold biting through his thin pajamas. Snow and ice making the shingles treacherous. Began sliding down toward the edge, planning to lower Zoe as far as possible before dropping her into the snowbank below, when a second crash, even louder than the first, rocked the house. The vibration sending Robert sliding uncontrollably, his bare feet finding no purchase on the icy surface. And Zoe went over the edge, falling the last 6 feet, landing hard in the snowbank below. Pain shot through Robert's ankle as he twisted to ensure Zoe didn't bear the impact, but he'd kept her safe clutched against his chest. Max appeared at the window above, barking frantically as more of the house interior became visible, the bedroom now clearly filling with flames. "Jump, Max," Robert called, but at that moment, a section of burning ceiling collapsed into Zoe's room, sending a shower of sparks and flaming debris through the opening. The dog disappeared from view. Robert. Sarah's scream cut through the night. She was running toward them, Emma and Liam close behind, having emerged from the back of the house. "Zoe." Robert struggled to stand, his ankle screaming in protest. "She's alive," he gasped, handing his still unconscious daughter to Sarah, but Max is still inside, as if summoned by his name. Max reappeared at the window, leaping without hesitation, the large shepherd sailing through the air, landing heavily in the snow, scrambling up, shaking embers from his fur. "Thank God," Emma sobbed, throwing her arms around the dog's neck. Robert did another count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all present, all safe, as behind them their home, the farmhouse that had sheltered generations of Thompsons, became fully engulfed in flames, lighting up the night sky. The family huddled together in the snow, watching their lives burn. Max pressing against them as if still trying to herd them further from danger. When they heard it, the first siren wailing in the distance, help was coming, but for their home it was already too late. The Thompsons huddled together in their neighbor's truck, blankets wrapped around their shoulders, watching helplessly as their home continued to burn despite the efforts of the volunteer firefighters, who had arrived minutes earlier at the flames. Visible for miles in the dark rural night, casting an orange glow against the heavy clouds. "She still hasn't woken up," Sarah whispered, her voice trembling as she cradled Zoe against her chest. The little girl's breathing shallow, her face smudged with soot. "She needs a hospital." Robert nodded grimly, his ankle throbbing where he'd twisted it in the fall from the roof. "The ambulance is coming," they said. 10 minutes. He pulled Emma and Liam closer, trying to shield them from both the bitter cold and the sight of their childhood home being consumed. "You're both okay?" he asked for the dozenth time. "No burns, no injuries." "We're fine, Dad," Emma assured him, her voice mature beyond her 14 years, though her eyes never left the burning house. Thanks to Max. At the sound of his name, the German shepherd whined softly from his position pressed against Liam's legs, the boy's fingers buried in the dog's thick fur, seeking comfort in the familiar touch. "He saved us," Liam said simply. "He woke everyone up." Robert squeezed his son's shoulder, words failing him as the enormity of what had just happened began to sink in. They had lost nearly everything: material possessions, photos, heirlooms, the accumulated treasures of their family life, but they were alive. All of them. They had escaped with their lives because of their dogs. Warning Sarah suddenly stiffened. "Where's Zoe's medicine?" she asked, panic edging into her voice. Herbert felt his stomach drop. Zoe's emergency inhaler for her asthma had been in the bathroom cabinet, along with all their other medications. "It's gone. Everything in the house is gone. She needs it, especially after the smoke." Sarah's voice rose, the calm she had maintained beginning to fracture. "If she has an attack, the ambulance will have what she needs." Robert interrupted, trying to project a confidence he didn't feel. "They'll be here any minute," as if summoned by his words. They heard another siren in the distance growing louder. A welcome sound in the night, the volunteer fire department had called for medical backup as soon as they'd learned children were involved. More vehicles were arriving, neighbors from surrounding farms, alerted by the column of smoke or by calls through the rural community's phone tree. The Thompsons weren't just any family in Pine Creek. Sarah was the town's family doctor, treating everything from farm mummies to delivering babies. Robert taught science at the high school they were woven into the fabric of the community in a way only possible in small towns. Dave and Mary Kowalski, who lived on the neighboring farm, had been first to arrive, bringing blankets in their truck with the heater running, offering immediate shelter from the dangerous cold. "Whatever you need," Dave had said, gripping Robert's shoulder. "You've got it. Our home is yours for as long as necessary." Now Mary approached the truck carrying thermoses of hot chocolate. "Ambulance just radioed, they're 5 minutes out," she reported. "Fire chief says they're containing the blaze," but she trailed off, the unspoken truth hanging in the air. There would be nothing to salvage. Robert nodded, accepting a thermos with murmured thanks. The heat welcome against his frozen hands. He looked down at Zoe's still form, anxiety gnawing at him. Why hadn't she regained consciousness? He'd gotten to her quickly, hadn't he? How long had she been breathing smoke before Max alerted them? The questions circled like vultures, each one carrying its weight of parental guilt and fear. "Max saved her," Liam said again, as if reading his father's thoughts. "He tried to wake her up first before getting you." Robert looked at their dog, really looked at him for the first time since the escape, and felt a new wave of concern. Max was panting heavily. His breathing labored, his eyes bloodshot, the white fur around his muzzle was gray with soot. He had been in the burning house longest of all of them, had breathed more smoke, had risked everything to alert his family. "He needs to be checked too," Robert said. "Mary, is there a vet on call?" "Dr. Collins always responds to emergencies," Mary assured him, already pulling out her phone. "I'll call him now." Emma was watching Max with growing concern. "Dad, his paws look burned," she said, pointing to where the dog had finally laid down, his massive head still up, alert, despite his obvious exhaustion. Small patches of fur on his legs appeared, singed the pads of his feet. Before Robert could respond, the ambulance pulled up, lights flashing, paramedics jumping out with practiced efficiency, quickly assessing the situation, focusing immediately on the unconscious child and the injured father. Smoke inhalation, suspected mild concussion, possible broken ankle, the lead paramedic summarized as they prepared Zoe for transport, fitting an oxygen mask over her small face. "We need to get them to regional right away. The little one, especially my wife and other children," Robert asked as a second paramedic wrapped his ankle. "They should come too." "For evaluation," was the firm response. "Smoke inhalation can have delayed effects." "We want everyone checked out," Sarah nodded, already gathering Emma and Liam. "What about Max?" she asked. "He was in the fire longest?" The paramedic glanced at the dog, noting his labored breathing. "Animals can be even more sensitive to smoke than humans," he said. "Get him to a vet as soon as possible. I'll take him." Dave Kowalski volunteered. "Mary's already called Dr. Collins. He's meeting us at his clinic. Decisions were made quickly. The Thompsons would go in the ambulance, Max with the Kowalskis to the vet and town belongings sorted out later. Priorities clear in the crisis moment. Lives first, everything else distant secondus. The paramedics loaded Zoe into the ambulance. Sarah climbed in beside her, Emma and Liam following. Robert paused at the doorway, looking back at Max still lying in the snow beside Dave's truck. The shepherd's eyes locked on the ambulance, as if understanding that his smallest pack member was inside. "Take care of him," Robert told Dave, his voice breaking. "He saved our lives." "All of us," Dave nodded solemnly, "like he was my own," he promised as the ambulance doors closed. Robert caught one last glimpse of their home, now mostly collapsed. The flames still visible, the firefighters still working, but the structure, beyond saving 8 years of memories, reduced to ash and ember in less than 30-minute test. Paramedic beside Hema adjusted his oxygen mask. "Your dog's a hero," she said, simply following his gaze to the burning farmhouse. "Not many would run back into a fire like that." Robert could only nod, words inadequate to express what Max had done, what he meant to their family, the debt they could never repay. But as the ambulance pulled away, carrying them towards safety and medical care, he made a silent promise to the faithful shepherd who had risked everything for them. Whatever happened next, Max would be taken care of, protected, loved for all his remaining days. It was the least they could do for the dog who had saved their children, their family, their livises. They turned onto the main road. The last view of their property disappeared, the burning house no longer visible, only the distant glow against the night sky remaining. Robert closed his eyes, his mind filled with the image of Max standing at Zoe's bedside, barking the warning that had given them the precious minutes needed to escape, and wondering with growing fear what price their loyal companion might have paid for his courage. Max knew something was wrong beyond the burning house, beyond the separation from his family. His chest felt tight each breath. A struggle, his eyes burned, his paws throbbed with pain, but these physical discomforts were secondary to his anxiety about Zoe. He had tried to wake her, tried to make her understand the danger, but she had remained asleep. Even as the smoke grew thicker, he had failed in his primary duty to protect her, and now she was being taken away in the loud vehicle with flashing lights while strangers held him back. Man from the neighboring farm, Dave, who smelled like hay and diesel and whose hands were gentle, kept saying, "Easy boy, it's okay." But Max knew it wasn't okay. Nothing was okay. His family was gone. His home was burning, and most importantly, Zoe was out of his sight, possibly still in danger. Tried to stand, wanting to follow the ambulance, but his legs trembled, refusing to support his weight. The woman Mary knelt beside him, offering water, which he lapped gratefully, his throat raw from smoke and barking, but water couldn't fix what was wrong, couldn't reunite him with his family, couldn't tell him if Zoe was safe. "We need to get him to Collins," Dave said, his voice tight with concern. "He's not doing well." Max felt himself being lifted, carried to the truck, placed gently on a blanket in the back seat. The familiar rumble of the engine starting normally. He loved truck rides. Head out the window, ears flapping in the wind, but now he could only lie there, his body betraying him, his strength ebbing with each painful breath as the truck began moving away from the farm. Max whined softly, raising his head to look back at the burning remains of his territory, the only home he had known since Robert had rescued him from the shelter all those years ago, the place where he had first met tiny fragile Zoe, where he had found purpose, meaning, belonging. The memories came in fragments, the way his canine mind processed the past, not in linear narrative, but in sensory impressions, emotional markers, significant moments that had shaped his understanding of his place in the world. Remembered the shelter, the fear, the loneliness, the sense of abandonment, the concrete floor cold against his paws, the cacophony of barking, the smell of disinfectant and despair. Remembered Robert kneeling outside his kennel, speaking in that calm, steady voice that had immediately earned Max's trust. The drive to the farm, windows down, fresh air filling his lungs with new scents, new possibilities. Remembered meeting Sarah, who had approached cautiously, respected his space, earned his loyalty with patience and gentle hands. Emma and Liam, children, but not threatening, their energy matching his own, their games becoming part of his daily joy. But, most of all, he remembered Zoe first, as a small bundle brought home, wrapped in a yellow blanket smelling of milk and newness. The family gathering around her with such care, such protection, that Max had understood immediately this was something precious, something to be guarded at all costs. Had appointed himself her sentinel, positioning his body between her and any perceived threat, alert to her cries, attentive to her needs as she grew from a mobile infant to crawling explorer to running laughing child. His vigilance never wavered. No, as the truck sped through the night, Max fought against the heaviness in his limbs, the creeping darkness at the edges of his vision. He had a job to do. He needed to find Zoe, needed to be sure she was safe, needed to resume his post as her protector. Truck stopped outside a building. Max recognized the veterinary clinic where he came for his checkups, the place that smelled of other animals, of medicine, of fear, but also of healing. Dave lifted him again, carrying him inside where bright lights made his eyes water and unfamiliar hands reached for him. Smoke inhalation, burns on his paws and legs, possibly internal damage, a voice said. Dr. Collins, the human, who sometimes caused discomfort but who Sarah and Robert trusted. "Let's get him on oxygen right away. Fluids too, he's severely dehydrated." Max felt a mask placed over his muzzle, cool air flowing, making breathing slightly easier. Felt the prick of a needle in his leg, felt his collar being removed, his fur being parted, as gentle fingers examined him for injuries. But all he could think about was Zoe. Was she receiving the same care? Was someone helping her breathe? Was she awake yet? Was she scared without him? "He's been through hell," Collins said. "From the looks of it, he must have been in the fire much longer than the humans went back in." "Maybe." "That's what they said," Dave confirmed. "Went back for the little girl?" Zoe Collins made a sound of admiration. "Brave dog." Temperatures, elevated heart rate to fast respiration, labored, but considering what he's been through, it could be much worse. Max tried to focus on the voices, tried to understand what they meant for his future, for his reunion with his family, but the pain and exhaustion were becoming overwhelming. Darkness pressing in despite his determination to stay alert, to stay ready. Is he going to be okay? Mary asked, the question hanging in the air. Collins didn't answer immediately, his hands continuing their examination. Burns on his paws are second degree. Some singeing of the fur, but his thick coat protected him from worse damage. The real concern is his lungs. Smoke inhalation can cause delayed effects. We need to monitor him closely. The next 24 hours will tell. Max felt himself being lifted again, placed on a cool metal surface, felt something soft being positioned under his head, heard the beeping of machines, smelled antiseptic and medicine. His instinct to escape, to find his family, nearly overwhelming, but his body refusing to cooperate. "I need to call the hospital," Dave said. "Check on the Thompsons, especially the little one. Let them know about Max." Max's ears pricked at the mention of his family's name, one paw twitching as he tried again to rise, only to be gently restrained by Collins. "Easy boy," the vet murmured. "You need to rest now. You've done your job. They're safe because of you." But Max couldn't rest, wouldn't rest, not until he knew for certain, not until he saw Zoe with his own eyes, confirmed she was breathing healthy, whole. The urge to protect her so deeply ingrained in his being that even now, even through pain and exhaustion, it drove him, it defined him. Oxygen was helping the cool air soothing his burning lungs, allowing his thoughts to become clearer, his determination to strengthen. He would recover, he would find his family, he would resume his duties. There was no alternative, no acceptable outcome. That didn't include returning to Zoe's side, where he belonged as the medications Collins had administered began to take effect, dulling the pain, bringing unwelcome drowsiness. Max fought against closing his eyes, each blink lasting longer the darkness. More tempting, his last conscious thought was of Zoe's face, her small hands and his fur, her voice saying what she always said before. Sleep good night, Max, be a good boy, and he would be the best boy. He would heal, he would find her, he would protect her again. This was not the end of his watch, merely an interruption, a temporary separation. He would overcome as he had overcome abandonment, as he had overcome the fire. Nothing would keep him from his purpose, from his family, from the little girl who needed him most. By dawn, the news of the Thompson family's ordeal had spread throughout Pine Creek, the small town's informal communication network operating with an efficiency that technology couldn't match. Volunteer firefighters who had battled the blaze through the night had stopped at the local diner for coffee before heading home, sharing details of the dramatic rescue. The Thompsons, regular customers at the pharmacy, had overheard the emergency call for Zoe's asthma medication. The Kowalskis had updated their church prayer chain about Max's condition at the veterinary clinic. 8 a.m., when Sarah's medical practice was due to open, a handwritten sign had already been posted on the door. Closed due to family emergency. For medical needs, please see Dr. Harding and Lawson. Below it, a second note had appeared: donations for the Thompson family being accepted at First Pine Bank and Community Church. Pine Creek was that kind of town, the kind where everyone not only knew your name, but the names of your children, your pets, your struggles and triumphs, the kind where personal tragedy became community concern, where neighbors didn't simply watch from windows, but showed up with casseroles and spare bedrooms and children's clothes in the right size. At Regional Hospital 30 miles away, the Thompsons were still reeling from shock. Robert's ankle wrapped and splinted, a hairline fracture that would require weeks of healing. Emma and Liam treated for minor smoke inhalation and released to the care of Sarah's sister Jenny, who had driven through the night from Minneapolis to be with them. Sarah herself refusing to leave Zoe's bedside in the pediatric intensive care unit, where the little girl remained unconscious, her small body connected to monitors and an oxygen mask covering her face. Carbon monoxide levels are still elevated, Dr. Hernandez explained, reviewing Zoe's latest blood work, but they're improving. The oxygen therapy is working. What about brain damage? Sarah asked the question, clinical professional, her doctor's mind attempting to process what her mother's heart could barely contemplate. She was unconscious when Robert found her. How long was she breathing smoke before that? Hernandez's expression was compassionate but honest. We won't know for certain until she wakes up. The MRI showed no obvious signs of hypoxic injury, which is encouraging. Children are remarkably resilient, especially at her age. Sarah nodded mechanically, the words registering, but emotional response suspended, held at bay by the practiced compartmentalization that allowed her to function. And her lungs, with her history of asthma, were monitoring closely. Hernandez assured her the bronchodilators are helping reduce inflammation. There's no sign of acute respiratory distress at this point. Robert reached for Sarah's hand, his own medical knowledge limited, but his understanding of his wife profound. He could see her retreating behind the shield of professional assessment, distancing herself from the terror that threatened to overwhelm them both. When will she wake up? He asked the question Sarah couldn't bring herself to voice. Soon, I hope, Hernandez replied. Her sedation levels are minimal. Now it's just a matter of time. As the doctor moved on to check other patients, Robert and Sarah sat in silence beside their daughter's bed, the quiet broken only by the steady beeping of monitors and the hiss of oxygen, the hospital sounds that normally form the backdrop of Sarah's professional life. Now the soundtrack to her worst nightmare. I should have checked on her first, Robert said finally, the guilt he'd been carrying spilling out. I went to Emma and Liam first. I didn't think. Don't, Sarah interrupted, squeezing his hand. You got her out. That's what matters. If Max hadn't woken you. She couldn't finish the sentence. Couldn't give voice to the alternative that hovered unspoken between the mat, the mention of Max. Robert straightened. Have you heard anything from the Kowalskis about his condition? Sarah shook her head. Jenny said she'd call the vet when the clinic opened. I've been. She gestured helplessly toward Zoe. I'll check, Robert said, pulling out the borrowed phone. Jenny had brought them their own lost in the fire, along with everything else, a lifetime of possessions reduced to ash. In mini Tess's, he stepped into the hallway to make the call. Sarah leaned closer to Zoe's bed, studying her daughter's face for any sign of awakening. The dark lashes against pale cheeks, the small nose still smudged with soot, despite the nurse's careful cleaning, the lips slightly parted beneath the oxygen mask, every feature precious, familiar, beloved, her baby, her youngest, her Zoe. You need to wake up, sweetheart, she whispered. We're all waiting for you, Dad and Emma and Liam. And she hesitated, then added, and Max is waiting too. At the veterinary clinic, Dave Kowalski sat on the floor beside Max's kennel, the German Shepherd, heavily sedated but stable in IV, delivering fluids and medications, a canine oxygen mask fitted. Over his muzzle, the burns on his paws treated and bandaged. Dr. Collins had worked through the night, monitoring the dog's condition. Administering treatment, calling in a colleague from the emergency veterinary hospital in Lawson for consultation. He's holding his own, Collins told Dave, checking Max's vitals for the dozenth time. Better than I expected given the extent of smoke. Exposure the first 24 hours are critical, but if he continues this way, he'll recover. Dave asked, hope edging into his voice. Collins hesitated, choosing his words carefully. Survive, yes, recover. That's more complicated. The damage to his lungs could be permanent. He may never have the same stamina, the same capacity. We just don't know yet, Dave nodded, running a hand gently over Max's head, avoiding the areas where fur had been singed. Tough old boy, aren't you? He murmured. Thompson, tough. He needs to stay here for at least several days, Collins continued. Possibly longer, depending on his progress. The burn treatments alone require professional care, whatever he needs, Dave said firmly. Money's no object. The whole town will chip in. Collins smiled slightly. I figured as much. Already had 3 calls this morning, people wanting to contribute to his care. Dave's phone buzzed with an incoming call. Robert's name appearing on the screen courtesy of Jenny's contact list. It's Thompson, he said, standing quickly, checking on Max as Dave stepped away. To take the call, the clinic door opened, admitting Jim Brady, Pine Creek's former fire chief. Now retired after 30 years of service, Brady had been one of the first responders at the Thompson fire, arriving in his personal vehicle before the trucks had even left the station. How is he? Brady asked, nodding toward Max's kennel, his face lined with the particular gravity of someone who had seen too many fire victims, both human and animal. Holding on, Collins replied. What brings you by, Jim? Thought you'd be sleeping after being out all night at the fire. Brady shrugged, couldn't rest, not knowing. Particular interest in this case? Collins raised an eyebrow. Because it's the Thompsons. Partly, Brady acknowledged, but mostly because of him. He gestured toward Max. Not many living things run into a burning building, animal or human. I've spent my career pulling people out, never seen many go back involuntarily. Collins nodded, understanding. He went back for the little girl. That's what Robert said, Brady confirmed, moving closer to the kennel, observing Max with professional assessment. I've worked with search and rescue dogs, trained disaster dogs, seen police canines south in action, but this, he shook his head. This was different. This wasn't training. This was choice. Across the room, Dave ended his call, returning with visible emotion. Robert says Zoe's still unconscious but stable there. Hopeful she wake up soon. He swallowed hard. He asked about Max. Wanted to know everything. What did you tell him? Collins asked the truth. Dave said that he's fighting, that we're doing everything possible. Brady nodded, his expression solemn. Thompson needs to know we're taking care of his dog while he takes care of his family. That's how community works. He turned back to Max, studying the sleeping shepherd with renewed respect. And when the time comes, we'll make sure this dog gets the recognition he deserves. Pine Creek doesn't forget its heroes, even the 4-legged ones. Evening shadows lengthened across the hospital room as Robert dozed uncomfortably in the chair beside Zoe's bed, his injured ankle propped on a spare pillow. Sarah had stepped out briefly to check on Emma and Liam, who were staying with Jenny in the hospital's family waiting room, the children refusing to leave until their sister woke up. 17 hours had passed since the fire. 17 hours of waiting, praying, hoping for Zoe to open her eyes, for some sign that their family would be whole again. The doctors remained cautiously optimistic, each test showing improvement each hour without complication. A victory, but still Zoe slept, her small chest rising and falling with mechanical regularity, the monitors beeping their steady reassurance that she lived. Robert's eyes flickered open at a change in the rhythm, a subtle shift in the beeping pattern. He sat up immediately, alert despite his exhaustion, his gaze fixed on his daughter's face, searching for any sign of consciousness. Eyelids fluttered once, twice, then slowly opened, revealing confused blue eyes that darted around the unfamiliar room before finding his face. Recognition bringing momentary calm before panic set in her small hands, reaching for the oxygen mask. Hey, sweetie, it's okay, Robert soothed, gently restraining her hands. You need to keep that on. It's helping you breathe. Zoe's eyes widened with fear as memory, or fragments of it, returned, her mouth forming words behind the mask that Robert couldn't understand. You're in the hospital, he explained, keeping his voice calm despite the emotion threatening to overwhelm him. There was a fire at our house, but you're safe now. Everyone's safe. Zoe shook her head frantically, still trying to speak, one hand breaking free of his gentle grasp to pull at the mask. Zoe, please, Robert began, but something in her desperate expression made him reconsider. He carefully lifted the mask just enough for her to speak. Max, she whispered, her voice hoarse from smoke and intubation. Where's Max? Of course, her first thought would be for the dog, her constant companion, her protector. Trust Zoe to worry about Max before herself. Even now, Max is okay, Robert assured her, replacing the mask. He's at Dr. Collins's clinic getting special treatment for his paws and some medicine to help his breathing, just like you. Zoe seemed to process this, her eyes still concerned, but the panic receding. She pointed at Robert's ankle, raised in its splint. Just a small break, he said, following her gaze. Doesn't even hurt much. The lie came easily, parental instinct to protect her from worry. Mom and Emma and Liam are fine too. They're just down the hall, waiting to see you. As if summoned by his words, Sarah appeared in the doorway, stopping short at the sight of Zoe, awake, emotion breaking through her professional composure. Oh, thank God, she breathed, rushing to the bedside. Zoe, baby. The next few minutes were a blur of activity as Sarah pressed the call button, alerted the medical team to Zoe's changed condition. Doctors and nurses flowing into the room, checking vitals, asking questions, performing quick neurological assessments. A flurry of professional activity underscored by profound personal relief. Response normal. Follow my finger with your eyes. Can you squeeze my hand? Do you know where you are? Do you remember what happened? Zoe endured the examinations with stoic patience, answering questions with nods or headshakes, conserving her limited energy, but her eyes kept returning to her parents, seeking reassurance, particularly when the doctor asked about her memories of the fire. It's common to have patchy recall of traumatic events, Dr. Hernandez explained, noting Zoe's hesitation. Especially with potential hypoxia, the memories might return over time or they might not. When the medical team finally withdrew, satisfied with Zoe's initial responses, Emma and Liam were allowed in, their faces lighting up at the sight of their sister awake. Liam immediately launching into a detailed account of the fire, the escape, the community response, while Emma simply held Zoe's hand, squeezing it periodically as if to reassure herself that her sister was really there, really awake. And Max was so brave, Liam was saying, his words tumbling over each other in excitement. He woke up Dad first, then led everyone to the back stairs, and when we realized you weren't with us, he ran back inside to find you before Dad even got there. Eyes widened at this information, her gaze shifting to Robert, questioning. It's true, Robert confirmed. Max knew exactly where to find you. He was already in your room when I got there. Zoe pulled at her mask again, Robert obligingly lifting it. Can I see him? She asked, her voice stronger now, betraying her agornesera, and Robert exchanged glances. The question they'd been anticipating but still weren't fully prepared to answer. Not right away, sweetheart, Sarah said gently. Max needs time to heal, just like you do. He breathed in a lot of smoke, and his paws got burned in the fire, but he's going to be okay, right? Zoe persisted, her blue eyes intense. He's going to get better. Another glance between parents, another moment of silent communication, weighing honesty against protection, truth against comfort. The doctors are doing everything they can for him, Robert said carefully, just like your doctors are doing everything for you. It wasn't a direct answer, and Zoe knew it, her expression clouding, but before she could press further, Sarah intervened. Why don't you rest a bit more? The more you sleep, the faster you'll heal, and the sooner you can see Max. The logic appealed to Zoe's 6-year-old reasoning. She nodded reluctantly, her eyelids already growing heavy, the brief period of consciousness having depleted her limited energy within minutes. She had drifted back to sleep, though this time it was natural healing slumber, not the worrying unconsciousness of before. I need to call Dave, Robert said once he was certain Zoe was sleeping soundly. Get an update on Max. She's going to keep asking. Sarah nodded. I know. She hesitated, then added, we need to be prepared, Robert, in case. She couldn't finish the sentence. Don't, Robert said, echoing her earlier response when he'd expressed his guilt. He's tough. He'll pull through. But as he stepped into the hallway to make the call, his confidence wavered, uncertainty gnawing at him. The memory of Max's labored breathing, his singed fur, his evident exhaustion after the fire, combining with his own medical knowledge, limited though it was, to paint a concerning picture. Dave answered on the first ring. Robert, any news? Zoe woke up, Robert said, relief coloring his voice anew with each telling. She's going to be okay. No apparent brain damage though. They'll do more tests tomorrow. Thank God, Dave breathed. That's wonderful news. Truly. How's Max? Robert asked the question he'd been holding back, dreading the answer yet needing to know. Be straight with me, Dave. There was a pause heavy with implication before Dave responded. He's fighting Robert Collins, is doing everything possible, but it's touch and go. The smoke damage to his lungs was significant, worse than they initially thought. An infection has set in on some of the burns. Robert closed his eyes, absorbing the blow. What are his chances? Collins won't say exactly, Dave admitted. You know how vets are, they don't like to make predictions. But he hesitated. It doesn't look good, Robert, I'm sorry. The words hit with physical force, driving the air from Robert's lungs. A pain that had nothing to do with his injured ankle, and everything to do with the loyal companion who had saved their lives, who might lose his own in the process. Zoe's asking for him, Robert said, his voice thick. It's the first thing she wanted to know when she woke up. Where Max was, if he was okay. Kids and their dogs, Dave said, understanding implicit in his tone. What will you tell her? I don't know. Robert admitted the truth eventually, but not yet, not while she's still recovering herself. Collins says Max could crash or turn the corner in the next 12 hours. Dave offered, maybe wait, see which way it goes. Robert nodded, though Dave couldn't see him. Keep me updated. Any change, any news at all? I want to know immediately. Of course, Dave promised. The whole town's pulling for him, Robert, not just for your family's sake, but for his own. Everyone knows what he did, how he saved you all. It's all anyone's talking about. After ending the call, Robert remained in the hallway, gathering himself, preparing to return to Zoe's room with a calm expression, a reassuring presence, unwilling to add to her burden with his own fear, his own grief at the possibility of losing Max. How could he explain to a 6-year-old that her beloved companion might die because he had saved her? How could he help her understand the concept of sacrifice when he could barely process it himself? How could he prepare her for loss when they had already lost so much? As he stood there grappling with these impossible questions, a nurse approached, her expression sympathetic. "Mr. Thompson, there's someone here to see you, a Mr. Brady. Says he's the former fire chief." Robert looked up, surprised. "Jim Brady?" "Yes, of course I know him." The nurse gestured toward the waiting area. "He says he has something important to discuss with you about the fire, something he thinks you should know." Jim Brady stood as Robert approached the waiting area, the former fire chief's weathered face grave, his posture still military straight. Despite being retired for nearly 5 years at 68, Brady remained an imposing figure in Pine Creek. A man whose opinion carried weight, whose judgment was trusted implicitly, especially in matters relating to fire. Robert, he greeted, extending a hand. "How's your little girl?" "She woke up," Robert said, accepting the handshake. "Doctors are optimistic. No apparent neurological damage, though they're still running tests." Relief softened Brady's expression. "That's good news. Very good news." He gestured to the chair's mind. "If we sit?" "That ankle looks painful." Robert nodded gratefully, lowering himself into a chair, his splinted ankle throbbing after standing. "Dave Kowalski said you were at the fire scene all night." "Old habits," Brady acknowledged with a small shrug. 30 years on the job, you don't just stop caring, don't stop responding even when it's not your responsibility anymore. He paused, studying Robert. "I've also been to see your dog at Collins's clinic." Robert leaned forward. "Max. How is he?" Dave said. It wasn't looking good. Brady's expression remained carefully neutral. "He's fighting odds aren't in his favor, but I've seen tougher cases pull through." He hesitated, then added, "That's partly why I'm here, Robert. There's something you should know about what happened, something the fire investigation is showing." Robert tensed. "What about it?" "The fire started in the kitchen wall." Brady explained. "Old wiring, probably stressed by the extreme cold. Typical for houses of that age. Nothing unusual there, but..." Robert prompted, sensing there was more. Brady met his eyes directly. "The fire spread quickly up the inside of the walls, reaching the second floor through the ventilation system. Within minutes, ordinary smoke detectors wouldn't have activated until the fire broke through the walls, which it hadn't done when your dog raised the alarm." Robert processed this information. "What are you saying, Jim?" "I'm saying that by all accounts your family had less than 3 minutes from when Max alerted you to when the main staircase became impassable." Brady stated. "Another 2 minutes, and the second exit would have been cut off too." He leaned forward, his voice low but intense. "Without those precious minutes of warning. You understand what I'm telling you, Robert?" The implication hit Robert with stunning clarity. "We wouldn't have made it out, none of us." Brady nodded. "Fire moves fast in old structures, especially in the cold, when everything's dry from heating." After reviewing the scene, talking to my colleagues, I can tell you with absolute certainty that without your dog's warning, you would have had 5 sleeping people with no escape route." Robert swallowed hard. The alternative timeline Brady described too horrific to contemplate. "How did he know?" he asked. "The smoke detectors didn't go off. There was no visible fire when I first woke up. Dogs can smell smoke at concentrations 100 times lower than humans," Brady explained. "They can hear things we can't, sense changes. We're oblivious to." Max knew something was wrong long before any human could have detected it." Robert ran a hand over his face, the full magnitude of what Max had done settling on his shoulders like a physical weight. "He saved us, all of us. That's why I'm here," Brady confirmed. "Make sure you understand exactly what happened, what your dog did." He paused, then added more gently, "and to prepare you for what might come next." Robert's head snapped up. "What do you mean?" Brady sighed, his expression somber. "I've seen a lot of fire victims in my time, Robert. Both people and animals. Smoke inhalation is insidious. The damage isn't always immediately apparent, can get worse before it gets better." Collins said Max's lungs were badly damaged. Robert acknowledged that infection had set in on the burns. Brady nodded. "It's serious, Robert. I won't sugarcoat it. Your dog took a massive hit, went back into that fire not once, but twice. From what I understand, stayed in the smoke longer than any of you." Robert closed his eyes briefly, the memory of Max disappearing back into Zoe's smoke-filled room still vivid. "What should I do, Jim? My daughter keeps asking for him. She doesn't understand how serious it is. None of us have even seen him since the fire." Brady considered this, his expression thoughtful. "In my experience, which is considerable, animals, like people, respond to the presence of those they love. When my canine partner Torch got injured in that warehouse fire back in '09, the vets weren't sure he'd make it. I remember Robert said the whole town was worried about him. What the papers didn't report was that I spent every possible minute at that clinic, talking to him, reminding him he had work to do, people who needed him." Brady's voice roughened with the memory. "Doctors said it made a difference. Gave him something to fight for." Robert understood immediately. "You think I should go see Max?" If Collins allows it, yes. Brady confirmed might help the dog, might help you to give you both some closure. Either way, the word closure sent a chill through Robert, its finality, its implication, hanging in the air between them. I can't leave Zoe, he said. Not right now, not when she just woke up, of course not. Brady agreed, but perhaps tomorrow or the next day, whenever she's stable, whenever. You can step away briefly, he stood, signaling the end of their conversation, just something to consider. Robert rose as well, wincing as he put weight on his injured ankle. Thank you, Jim, for coming, for telling me this. Brady nodded once. Your dog's a hero, Robert, in every sense of the word, what he did. He paused, searching for words. In 30 years of fire service, I've never seen anything like it. Not from a dog, not from a human either. It's exceptional. As Brady turned to leave, Robert called after him, Jim, what happened to Torch? After the warehouse fire. Brady stopped to smile, touching his weathered face for the first time. Served another 4 years before retiring. Lived to the ripe old age of 15. Slept on my bed every night until the end. He nodded once more. Don't count your dog out yet. Robert Thompson. Dogs can surprise you, especially the ones with something to live for. After Brady left, Robert remained in the waiting area, processing everything he'd learned. The fire, Chief's assessment of how close they'd come to tragedy, the validation of Max's heroism, the suggestion that his presence might help the injured dog, the implication that time might be running out. This phone buzzed with a text from Sarah, checking on his whereabouts, reminding him Zoe was asking for him. Again, with a deep breath, Robert composed himself, pushing aside his own emotional turmoil, focusing on what needed to be done. Now his daughter needed him, his family needed him. Max would want him to prioritize them, especially Zobat. As he made his way back to Zoe's room, Robert knew he would find a way to get to the veterinary clinic soon, would find a way to see Max, to thank him. If nothing else, to say goodbye. If it came to that, their loyal companion deserved that much, deserved everything they could possibly give him. After what he had done for them entering Zoe's room, Robert found her awake again, propped up on pillows. Her color improved, the oxygen mask replaced with a less restrictive nasal cannula. Emma and Liam sitting on the edge of the bed, regaling her with stories of the community's response to the fire, the donations pouring in, the offers of help, the temporary housing arrangements. Daddy, Zoe called, her face lighting up at the sight of him. Liam says, Mrs. Jenkins from my school is collecting dog toys for Max. Is that true? Robert smiled, sitting carefully on the edge of the bed. The whole town is doing things for Max, sweetheart. He's quite the celebrity now. Zoe's expression turned serious. When can I see him? I need to thank him for saving me. Robert exchanged glances with Sarah, who gave an almost imperceptible nod. As soon as you're both feeling better, he promised. Max is still at the animal hospital, getting special treatment. Is he very hurt? Zoe asked, her perception cutting through the adult's careful evasions. Robert hesitated, then decided on a version of the truth. Yes, honey, he is. He breathed in a lot of smoke and burned his paws, but Dr. Collins is taking excellent care of him. Eyes filled with tears. It's because he came back for me, isn't it? That's why he's hurt so bad. The question caught Robert off guard. Though it shouldn't have, Zoe had always been intuitive beyond her years, especially about Max. Yes, he admitted. He came back to find you, to wake you up. Zoe was quiet for a moment, processing this, her small face solemn. He's the bravest dog in the world, she said finally, and I'm going to make him all better when I see him. Robert smiled, though his heart ached with the knowledge that it might not be that simple. I know you will, sweetheart, he said, smoothing her hair. I know you will. 2 days later, Robert stood outside the Pine Creek Veterinary Clinic, gathering his resolve, the morning sun providing little warmth against the continuing bitter cold. Zoe's condition had improved steadily, her oxygen levels returning to normal, her lungs clearing, her energy increasing. Though she remained in the hospital for observation, Sarah had finally convinced him to take a break to go see Max. While she stayed with their daughter, she's stable, Robert. Sarah had insisted, you need to do this for Max and for yourself. He had known she was right, had felt the pull to check on their dog growing stronger with each passing hour, each update from Dave, each question from Zoe about when Max would come home, the guilt at not having seen the shepherd since the fire weighing on him almost as heavily as his gratitude. Taking a deep breath, Robert pushed open the clinic door, the familiar smell of antiseptic and animal hitting him immediately. Dr. Collins looked up from the reception desk, surprise registering briefly before his professional demeanor took over. Robert, he greeted, coming around the desk. How's Zoe? Doing well, Robert replied. Doctors say she might be released tomorrow. No lasting damage from the smoke. He hesitated, then asked the question that had been consuming him and Max. How is he? Collins's expression remained carefully neutral. Still with us, which is something of a miracle given the extent of his injuries. Would you like to see him? Robert nodded, not trusting himself to speak as Collins led him through the clinic, past examination rooms and kennels containing other patients, to a quiet back area reserved for critical cases. Max was in a large kennel, his massive form still, except for the shallow rise and fall of his chest, an IV line running into his front leg, oxygen being delivered through a specialized canine mask, bandages covering his paws, and patches of his once thick fur, several monitors displaying his vital signs. He's sedated, Collins explained, keeping him calm to minimize oxygen demand. The burns on his paws are responding to treatment, but the pneumonia is proving stubborn. Robert knelt beside the kennel, his throat tight with emotion. Max looked smaller, somehow vulnerable. In a way Robert had never associated with the powerful shepherd who had always seemed indestructible. "Can I touch him?" Collins nodded. Talking to him might help. Many studies suggest animals respond to familiar voices, even when sedated. Robert carefully opened the kennel door, reaching in to gently stroke the unburned areas of Max's head. "Hey buddy," he said softly, his voice rough with emotion. "It's me, it's Robert." Max's eyes remained closed, but his ear twitched slightly at the sound of his owner's voice. "I came to check on you too." "Thank you," Robert continued. "Zoe's doing great. Thanks to you, we all are." He swallowed hard. "She's asking about you, wants to see you as soon as possible. So you need to get better, okay? You need to fight." Collins stepped back, giving Robert privacy. The intimacy of the moment between man and dog not requiring an audience. "I don't know if you can hear me," Robert whispered, his hand continuing its gentle stroking. "But Jim Brady, the fire chief, said we wouldn't have made it without you. That you gave us the warning we needed when no one else could have known." His voice broke. "You saved my children, Max. All of them. You saved Sarah, you saved me." Max's tail moved slightly, just the bare twitch, but enough to suggest some level of awareness. Some recognition of Robert's presence encouraged. Robert continued talking, telling Max about Zoe's recovery, about the community's response, about the temporary housing arrangements the Kowalski had made for the family, about the plans already being discussed for rebuilding. The words pouring out in a cathartic stream. "The kids are staying with Sarah's sister for now, but they're coming to the hospital every day. Liam's telling everyone who'll listen about how you ran back into the fire. Emma's organized a fundraiser at school specifically for your medical care." He smiled slightly. "And Zoe's made you about 20 get-well cards already. Says she's going to read to you when you come home, just like you stayed with her when she was sick with chickenpox last year. Remember that? Wouldn't leave her side for 3 days." As Robert talked, he became aware of subtle changes in Max's condition. His breathing seemed less labored, his body less tense. One eye cracked open, revealing a sliver of brown iris, focusing with effort on Robert's face. "That's it, buddy," Robert encouraged. "That's it, come back to us." Collins, who had been monitoring from a distance, stepped forward, checking the monitors. "His stats are improving," he noted with surprise. "Oxygen saturation up, heart rate steadier." "He knows I'm here," Robert said with certainty. "He's responding." Collins nodded. "Keep talking. It seems to be helping." For the next hour, Robert remained beside Max's kennel, talking, reminiscing, encouraging, promising his hand, never leaving the dog's fur, his presence steady, reassuring, a lifeline for the shepherd to follow back from wherever his injured body had taken him during this time. Max's eyes opened fully, his tail wagged weakly, his nose pushed against Robert's hand, seeking contact. Familiarity, comfort. "I need to get back to Zoe," Robert said eventually, "but I'll come again tomorrow, and when you're better, when you can leave. Here you're coming with us, wherever we are. That's your home, Max, with us, with your family." As if understanding, Max licked Robert's hand once, a gesture so familiar, so normal, that Robert felt tears spring to his eyes. The simple connection more powerful than any words. "Remarkable," Collins said as he walked Robert back to the reception area. "I've seen animal-human bonds before, of course, but this." He shook his head. "His vitals are stronger than they've been since he arrived. His responsiveness significantly improved." "Will he recover?" Robert asked the question he'd been afraid to voice. Collins considered his answer carefully. "The next 24 hours will be critical. The pneumonia hasn't resolved, the lung damage is extensive, but..." He smiled slightly. "I'm more optimistic than I was this morning. Let's say that." "When could he come home?" "Assuming he continues to improve." "Not for at least a week," Collins cautioned. "Possibly longer. He'll need continued oxygen therapy, wound care monitoring, but eventually, yes, I believe he could recover enough to go home. Though he may never be quite the same, his lung capacity will likely be permanently reduced. Some scarring is inevitable." Robert nodded, absorbing this. "Will adapt whatever he needs, however he is. He's family." As Robert prepared to leave, the clinic's door opened, admitting an elderly woman carrying a basket. "Oh, Mr. Thompson," she exclaimed. "I hoped I might see you. I brought something for Max, some of those liver treats. He loves when he visits with Sarah." Robert recognized Mrs. Patterson, one of Sarah's long-term patients. "That's very kind of you. It's the least I can do," she said firmly. "That dog saved your family. Everyone knows it. The whole town's talking about." "Nothing else." She handed the basket to Collins. "There's a blanket in there too, one that smells like home." Thought it might comfort him. Before Robert could respond, another client entered, carrying a small stuffed toy for Max. The man said simply, "From my kids, they wanted him to have it throughout the day." The pattern continued as word spread that Robert was at the clinic. People appeared bearing gifts for Max: treats, toys, blankets, cards, special foods, each delivery accompanied by expressions of concern, support, gratitude, the collective emotion of a small town channeled into care for the dog, who had become their shared hurrowby. Late afternoon, when Robert finally left to return to the hospital, the clinic's reception area resembled a small shrine to Max. Photos of him with the Thompson family, surrounded by offerings from the community. Collins had been forced to designate a special area just for the gifts, promising to bring items to Max one at a time so as not to overwhelm the recovering Doug never seen anything quite like it. Collins admitted, walking Robert to his borrowed car though. I can't say I'm surprised Pine Creek takes care of its own human or canine. Robert nodded, unable to speak past the lump in his throat. The community's response, the improvement in Max's condition, Zoe's recovery, all combining to overwhelm him with gratitude, with hope that perhaps they would emerge from this tragedy not unscathed, but whole in the ways that mattered most. As he drove toward the hospital, Robert found himself making plans, practical arrangements that would need to be considered. Max's ongoing care, the special accommodations he might need, the adjustments they would make as a family to ensure his comfort, his recovery, his place in their lives secured not out of obligation but out of love, a recognition that the bond between them had been forged in ordinary moments and tempered in fire, proving itself unbreakable. 5 days after the fire, Zoe Thompson was released from the hospital, her small body still requiring supplemental oxygen through a portable device, but otherwise recovered enough to leave the medical facility, her discharge coinciding with a major improvement in Max's condition, the pneumonia finally responding to aggressive antibiotic therapy, his oxygen levels stabilizing. He's turned a corner, Collins had told Robert during his daily visit to the clinic, not out of the woods entirely, but moving in the right direction. The news had transformed Zoe's mood from anxious anticipation to jubilant excitement. Max is getting better, and I'm going home today, she had declared, bouncing slightly on her hospital bed as Sarah packed her belongings. It's the best day ever. Sarah had exchanged glances with Robert, both adults understanding that home was now a relative term, their actual house reduced to a charred foundation. Their temporary residence, the Kowalskis' guest cottage, a small but comfortable space the neighbors had insisted they use for as long as necessary. Though plans for rebuilding were already underway, insurance adjusters contacted contractors. Consulted, we're going to Aunt Jenny's first, Sarah reminded Zoe gently. Remember, until the cottage is ready. Zoe nodded impatiently. I know, but we're all together. That's what matters. Her expression turned serious beyond her years. And Max will come too when he's better, right? Absolutely, Robert confirmed. He's part of the family. The drive from the hospital to Jenny's suburban Minneapolis home took nearly an hour, Zoe chattering the entire way, her energy seemingly undiminished by her ordeal, asking repeatedly when she could visit Max, planning the activities they would do together once he was released from the clinic, detailing the special bed she wanted to make for him. He can sleep in my room every night, she declared, to keep the bad dreams away. Robert, driving the used SUV they'd purchased with insurance money to replace their destroyed vehicles, glanced at Sarah, her expression reflecting his own concern. They had both noticed Zoe waking with nightmares during her hospital stay, calling out for Max in the dark moments, though she rarely remembered these episodes in the morning. We'll see, sweetie, Sarah said diplomatically. Max might need his own quiet space to recover, but he always sleeps with me, Zoe protested. He keeps me safe. The simple statement hung in the air, its truth undeniable. After what had happened, its implications complex for parents trying to balance a child's emotional needs against a recovering animal's physical ones. At Jenny's house, Emma and Liam were waiting on the porch despite the cold, their faces lighting up at the sight of their sister emerging from the car, Zoe running to them as fast as her still healing lungs would allow, the siblings embracing in a tangle of arms and excited voices. We made a welcome home sign, but Aunt Jenny said it was too cold to hang it outside, Liam explained, leading Zoe into the house, where a colorful banner stretched across the living room wall. And we got all your favorite foods, Emma added, pizza and those special cookies from Peterson's Bakery and chocolate milk. Zoe's eyes widened with delight. Really? Even the sprinkle cookies? Even the sprinkle cookies, Jenny confirmed, emerging from the kitchen to hug her niece. Nothing but the best for our girl. The afternoon passed in a blur of family togetherness, eating, talking, playing board games, watching movies, the Thompsons cocooning themselves in the simple pleasure of being together, being safe, the material losses of the fire temporarily forgotten, in the profound relief of what had been preserved, what truly mattered. But as evening approached, Zoe grew quieter, her gaze drifting more frequently to the window, her energy visibly flagging, though she insisted she wasn't tired. When can we visit Max? She asked during dinner, pushing her pizza around her plate rather than eating it. Dad said he's getting better, Robert nodded. He is. Dr. Collins says his breathing is much improved, and the burns on his paws are healing well, so we can go see him tomorrow. Zoe pressed. Please. Robert exchanged glances with Sarah, both considering the request. Maybe not tomorrow, he said gently. You still need rest, and Max does too, but soon, I promise. Zoe's lower lip trembled. But I need to see him. I need to tell him thank you for saving me. He knows, sweetie, Sarah assured. Her dad's been visiting him every day, telling him how well you're doing. It's not the same, Zoe insisted, tears welling. He's all alone at the doctor's. He needs me. The adults shared concerned looks over her head. Jenny, stepping in with practiced on diplomacy. Hey Zoe, how about we make a special video for Max tonight? You can record a message for him, show him your new pajamas, tell him about coming home. Zoe considered this compromise, and Dad can show it too. Him tomorrow? First thing, Robert promised. I'll make sure Dr. Collins plays it for him. Partially satisfied, Zoe agreed to the plan, though her disappointment remained evident in her subdued demeanor throughout the evening routine as bedtime approached. Her anxiety visibly increased, manifesting in small ways familiar to her parents' reluctance to brush her teeth, dawdling over pajamas, repeated requests for water. "Would you like me to sleep in here with you tonight?" Sarah offered, sensing the underlying fear as she tucked Zoe into the unfamiliar bed in Jenny's spare room. Zoe shook her head. "No, thank you," she said with determined bravery, though her small fingers clutched the blanket tightly. "I'm okay," Sarah sat on the edge of the bed, smoothing Zoe's hair. "It's all right to be scared sometimes," she said gently, "especially after what happened." Zoe was quiet for a moment, then asked in a small voice, "Do you think Max was scared when he came back for me in the fire?" The question caught Sarah off guard, its insight, its empathy, typical of her youngest child's emotional intelligence. "Probably," she answered honestly, "but he came anyway, because he loves you like you and Daddy would," Zoe said with certainty. "Even if you were scared exactly like that," Sarah confirmed her, throat tight with emotion. Zoe nodded, absorbing this, considering its implications with the straightforward logic of childhood. "Then I can be brave too, until Max comes home," she decided, "because that's what families do." Sarah leaned down, kissing her daughter's forehead. "That's exactly what families do. They're brave for each other. They take care of each other. Like Max took care of us," Zoe murmured, her eyelids growing heavy despite her earlier protests of not being tired. "Just like Max," Sarah agreed, watching as Zoe drifted towards sleep. The events of the day finally catching up with her, Sarah remained beside the bed until she was certain Zoe was deeply asleep, then quietly left the room, finding Robert in the kitchen with Jenny and the older children, the adults speaking in low voices about practical matters, insurance claims, school arrangements, rebuilding options. "She's asleep," Sarah reported, joining them at the table, accepting the cup of tea Jenny offered, "though I'm not sure how long it will last." "Nightmares again?" Robert asked, concerned. Sarah nodded. "Likely she's processing a lot. The trauma, the changes, everything that's happened." She sighed, rubbing her temples. "I'm worried about her attachment to Max, how heavily she's relying on the idea of his return." "It's understandable," Jenny offered. "He's a symbol of security for her, especially now when everything else has changed. But what if he doesn't recover completely?" Sarah voiced the concern. They'd been dancing around Collins as optimistic. "Yes, but he's also realistic about the potential long-term effects, the reduced lung capacity, the possible behavioral changes." "We'll deal with that if it happens," Robert said firmly. "Right now Max is improving, Zoe is improving. We take the wins where we can find them." The conversation continued late into the evening, the adults planning, adjusting, strategizing around the new reality of their lives, while Emma and Liam eventually drifted off to their own rooms, the family settling into the temporary rhythms of displacement, finding stability where they could. It was just past midnight when the screams began, Zoe's terrified voice cutting through the quiet house. "Max! Max!" Fire! Robert and Sarah were moving before fully awake, parental instinct overriding exhaustion, reaching Zoe's room in seconds, finding her sitting upright in bed, eyes wide but unseeing, caught in the grip of a night terror. "Zoe, it's okay. You're safe," Sarah soothed, gathering her daughter into her arms. "It's just a dream." "The fire," Zoe gasped, clinging to her mother. "Max is in the fire." "There's no fire, sweetheart," Robert assured her, sitting on the bed's edge. "We're at Aunt Jenny's. Remember, everyone is safe. Max is safe at Dr. Collins's clinic." Gradually, reality penetrated the nightmare, Zoe's breathing slowing, her body relaxing against Sarah's. "I want Max," she whispered. "He keeps the bad dreams away." "I know, baby," Sarah murmured, rocking her gently. "I know." Robert watched him, his decision crystallizing in that moment, clarity emerging from the chaos of the past week. "I'll take her to see him tomorrow," he said quietly. "Collins said he's stable enough for short visits. It might help them both." Sarah met his eyes over Zoe's head, gratitude and understanding passing between them. "I think that's exactly what they need," she agreed as Zoe drifted back to sleep. Nestled between her parents in the unfamiliar bed, Robert found himself planning the visit, imagining the reunion between child and dog, hoping it would begin the healing both so desperately needed, while recognizing that the road ahead remained uncertain, the full impact of the fire's trauma still unfolding, for all of them, humans and canine alike. The Pine Creek Veterinary Clinic had never seen a visit quite like this one, Dr. Collins reflected as he prepared Max for his special guests. The German Shepherd was still receiving oxygen therapy, his burned paws still bandaged, his recovery ongoing, but significant enough that Collins had agreed to Robert's request for a supervised reunion with Zoe. "Keep it brief," he had cautioned. 10 minutes. "Max is still weak, but I agree it might benefit both of them." Emotionally, Collins had prepared a quiet examination room for the meeting, bringing in a comfortable chair for Zoe, moving Max's portable oxygen unit, making the clinical space as welcoming as possible, the gesture seeming inadequate given the circumstances, but the best he could after. Precisely 10 o'clock, Robert's car pulled into the clinic parking lot, Zoe's face visible through the passenger window, her expression A mixture of excitement and anxiety. Collins, watching from the reception area, noted how carefully Robert lifted her from the vehicle, the portable oxygen canister, the deliberate pace as father and daughter approached the clinic door, the parallel recoveries of child and dog touching, even to his professionally detached perspective. Dr. Collins, Zoe exclaimed. When they entered, her voice breathless with anticipation. Is Max ready? Can I see him now? Collins smiled, kneeling to her level. He's ready and very excited to see you, but I need to explain some things first, okay? Zoe nodded solemnly, her small face serious because he's still sick like I was. Exactly, Collins confirmed. Max has bandages on his paws, where they were burned, and he's still using special oxygen to help him breathe just like you are, so he might seem different than you remember. Less energetic, that's okay, Zoe assured him. I was tired too when I first got out of the hospital, Daddy said. I slept almost all day. Collins glanced up at Robert, who nodded confirmation. Max might need to rest after you visit, but seeing you will make him very happy. Satisfied with this explanation, Zoe followed Collins through the clinic, Robert walking beside her carrying her oxygen canister. The parallels between child and dog continuing to strike Collins as they moved through the building. They reached the examination room. Collins opened the door, allowing Zoe to enter first. Max was lying on a padded bed, his ears perking up immediately at their arrival, his tail beginning a weak but definite wag as he registered Zoe's presence. Max, Zoe cried, her voice catching on a sob, as she rushed forward only to stop abruptly. Clearly remembering Collins's warnings about being Janelle Shepard's reaction was immediate. Despite his weakness, he attempted to rise his entire body, trembling. With the effort, his focus entirely on the little girl, his person, his primary charge, the one he had risked everything to save. Easy boy, Robert cautioned, moving quickly to support Max as the dog struggled to stand. Zoe, come closer so he doesn't hurt himself trying to get to you. Zoe approached slowly now, her initial excitement tempered by the visible evidence of Max's condition, the bandaged paws, the patches of missing fur, the canine oxygen mask set aside but within reach. Oh, Max, she whispered, reaching out to touch his head. You got hurt because of me. Max winced softly, leaning into her, touch his brown eyes never leaving her face, his tail continuing its steady rhythm against the bed. The communication between child and dog, transcending words deeper than language. Herbert helped Zoe onto the chair positioned next to Max's bed, allowing her to sit at eye level with the shepherd, her small hand continuing its gentle stroking along his head and neck, avoiding the areas where fur had been singed or shaved for treatment. I was so scared, Zoe told Max, her voice hushed, as if sharing a secret. I had bad dreams about the fire, about you being lost, but Daddy said you were here getting better. Just like I was. Max shifted slightly, moving closer to her, his head eventually resting against her leg, the physical connection seeming to satisfy some deep need in both of them. I made you something, Zoe continued, reaching into her pocket with her free hand, producing a carefully folded paper which she opened to reveal a child's drawing of a German shepherd wearing what appeared to be a cape. It's you as a superhero, because that's what you are. You saved us from the fire. Max's eyes remained fixed on Zoe, his attention unwavering. Despite his obvious fatigue, the bond between them palpable in the small examination room. A connection forged through years of ordinary moments and sealed in extraordinary circumstance. But watched them, his own emotions threatening to overwhelm him. The simple reunion, more powerful than he had anticipated. Max's evident joy at seeing Zoe, Zoe's careful tenderness with the injured dog, both of them survivors, both healing, both forever changed by what had happened. The doctor says you can come home soon, Zoe was telling Max, her fingers gently scratching behind his ears in the spot he had always loved. Not to our old house because it's gone, but to a new house, and I'm going to take care of you. Just like you took care of me. Max's tail wagged more vigorously at this, the word home clearly registering his understanding, remarkable even to Collins, who had spent his career working with animals. We're staying with Aunt Jenny now, but Daddy says we'll have a cottage soon, and then a whole new house, Zoe continued, her one-sided conversation, and you'll have a special bed right next to mine, so you can sleep there every night and keep the bad dreams away. Collins caught Robert's eye, gesturing subtly to his watch, a reminder of the agreed-upon time limit. Robert nodded. Understanding, Zoe, he said gently. We need to let Max rest now. Remember what Dr. Collins said about keeping the visit short. Zoe's face felt disappointment evident, but she didn't protest, understanding in her own way the needs of her canine friend. Okay, she agreed, but can I come back tomorrow? Collins stepped forward. Not tomorrow. Max needs a quiet day to recover, but perhaps the day after, if he continues to improve. Satisfied with this compromise, Zoe turned back to Max, leaning forward to place a gentle kiss on his head. I have to go now, but I'll come back soon, I promise, and then you'll come home with us and everything will be better. Max went softly as if protesting the separation, one paw moving despite the bandages to rest on Zoe's arm, a gesture so deliberate, so communicative, that even Collins with his professional detachment felt its impact. He doesn't want me to leave, Zoe said, looking up at the adults, her eyes filling with tears. He's scared. Robert knelt beside the chair. He knows you're coming back, he assured her, and he needs to rest to get stronger. Just like you do, Zoe. considered this, then nodded, reaching into her pocket again. I was going to save this for next time, she said, producing a small object, but he can have it now to remember me until I come back. She placed a well-worn hair ribbon on the bed next to Max. It smells like me, she explained, so he won't be lonely. The simple gesture, its thoughtfulness, its understanding of what might comfort the dog struck Robert anew. With the depth of the bond between his daughter and their pet, the mutual care, the reciprocal protection each offering what they could in their own ways, they prepared to leave. Max, watching them intently, his distress at their departure evident, Collins approached, with something in his hand. I have something for you too, Zoe, he said, offering a small square of fabric. This is a piece of the blanket. Max has been using it. Might help you sleep knowing you have something of his. Zoe accepted the gift with solemn gratitude, clutching it carefully in her small hand. Thank you for taking care of Max, she told Collins, with the direct sincerity of childhood. 6 months later, Robert Thompson stood on the newly poured concrete foundation of their rebuilding home, supervising the delivery of lumber, the spring air warm against his face, a welcome change from the bitter winter that had taken their previous house, the scars of the fire still visible in the blackened trees surrounding the property, but new growth emerging, green shoots pushing through the scorched earth, nature's own reconstruction, mirroring their own. Looking good, Mr. Thompson called. The foremen were right on schedule, should have the framing completed by the end of next week. Robert nodded his satisfaction. Appreciate the quick work, Mike. Whole town's invested in getting your family home, Mike replied simply before returning to direct his crew, the statement accurate in ways that went beyond the literal. Community fundraisers had supplemented their insurance settlement. Neighbors had provided temporary housing, local businesses had donated materials, services, time, the collective response to their tragedy becoming a source of healing in itself. From his position on the porch of the Kowalskis' guest cottage, which had been their temporary home for the past 5 months, Max watched the construction activity with alert interest, his posture relaxed but vigilant as always, his gaze frequently returning to Zoe, who was playing nearby under Sarah's watchful eye. Max's recovery had been gradual, challenging at times, the damage to his lungs permanent. According to Collins's assessment, requiring ongoing medication to manage inflammation. His exercise tolerance reduced, his endurance limited by comparison to his pre-fire capabilities, but his spirit, his essential nature as guardian and companion, unchanged perhaps, even deepened by what had happened. Eddie had come home to them 3 weeks after the fire, still requiring oxygen therapy, still healing from his burns, but determined to resume his duties, particularly his self-appointed role as Zoe's protector there. Reunion at the Kowalski cottage, emotional for the entire family, the German Shepherd inspecting each of them carefully before settling beside Zoe with a deep sigh of contentment. Finally home, finally complete. Nightmares had continued for both Zoe and Max. In those early weeks, Zoe waking crying from dreams of flames and smoke, Max whimpering in his sleep, paws twitching as if running from unseen danger. But gradually, with time, with therapy for Zoe, with patience and love for Max, the acute trauma had begun to recede, the memories integrating, becoming part of their story rather than defining it. Dad, Liam called, running from the construction site, where he'd been watching the workers with fascination. They're putting in the special door for Max, right? The one with the doggy entrance. Robert smiled at his son's enthusiasm. Yes, exactly. According to the plans, low threshold, wide opening, easy for him to navigate. The new house had been designed with Max's needs in mind. Wider hallways to accommodate his occasionally unsteady gait ramps. Instead of steps at entrances, special flooring that provided better traction for his scarred paw pads, a custom sleeping alcove in Zoe's room with its own heating pad for the joint pain that had developed as a consequence of his injuries, small accommodations for the dog, who had saved them all. And my room is going to be blue, right? Liam pressed, his excitement about the rebuilding undiminished despite the months of displacement. With the space theme we talked about, just as we planned, Robert confirmed, ruffling his son's hair. The painters start once the drywall is finished. As Liam ran to share this confirmation with Emma, who was sitting under a tree with her sketchbook, Robert's gaze returned to Max. The shepherd had risen, moving with deliberate care to position himself closer to Zoe, his vigilance a constant, his devotion unwavering despite his limitations. Changes in Max were visible to anyone who had known him before the fire, the slight hesitation in his gait, the premature graying around his muzzle, the reduced stamina that meant shorter walks, careful monitoring. But to the Thompsons, these changes were simply part of who he was now, badges of honor, marks of his courage, his sacrifice for their familia. Car pulled into the driveway, Jim Brady, emerging with his characteristic military posture. His visit not unexpected. The former fire chief had become a regular presence in their lives since the fire, his interest in Max's recovery, his support of the family's rebuilding efforts consistent and genuine. Robert, he greeted, approaching with a small package under his arm. How's the construction going? On schedule for once, Robert replied, shaking the older man's hand. What brings you by today? Brady smiled, glancing toward Max, who had noticed his arrival, tail wagging in recognition. Got something for our hero, actually, he said. Just arrived this morning, thought you'd want to have it right away. He handed Robert the package, which contained an official-looking certificate and a medal in a velvet Box the American Humane Hero Dog Award, Brady explained. National recognition for acts of extraordinary courage. They've never given it to a dog from Minnesota before. Robert opened the box, examining the medal, its weight substantial, its symbolism even more so. This is quite an honor. Well deserved, Brady stated simply. The ceremony's next month in Minneapolis. They'll send a car for the whole family. Max included first-class treatment all the way. Robert nodded, his throat tight with emotion. He deserves it. Brady's weathered face softened as he looked toward Max, who had returned to his position near Zoe. How's he doing? Really? Good days and bad. Robert admitted the lung damage is permanent. Collins says he'll always need medication, always have limitations, but his spirit, his heart, that's unchanged. Some things fire can't touch, Brady observed, learned that in 30 years of service, some things endure no matter how hot the flames, how complete the destruction. Robert Bay understood the deeper meaning in the former fire chief's words, had experienced it himself in the months since the fire, had witnessed the endurance of family bonds, community connections, love in its many forms, surviving when material possessions, structures, routines had been reduced to ash. Zoe's doing well? Brady asked, watching the little girl who was now approaching them, Max. Rising to follow her, his movements careful but determined. Much better, Robert confirmed. Still sees the therapist, but the nightmares are less frequent. She's processing it all remarkably well, considering. Zoe reached them, her face lighting up at the sight of their visitor. Mr. Brady, did you come to see our new house? It's going to have a special door for Max, and my room is going to be purple this time. Brady smiled, kneeling despite his arthritic knees to meet her at eye level. It looks wonderful, Zoe. And yes, I came to see the house, but I also brought something for Max. A very special award because he's a very special dog. Zoe's eyes widened as Robert showed her the medal. Max got a medal. Like a superhero. Exactly like a superhero. Brady confirmed, for bravery, for saving you and your family. Zoe considered this, her expression thoughtful beyond her years. He is brave. She agreed, the bravest dog in the world. She turned to Max, who had settled beside her, his body leaning slightly against her small frame, their connection as evident as ever. Did you hear that, Max? You got a medal for being a hero. Max's tail wagged at her attention, his brown eyes fixed on her face with the same devotion that had driven him back into the burning house 6 months earlier. His love, unmistakable, unconditional. The weeks that followed brought increasing progress on the new house walls, rising roof, installed windows. Placed each development celebrated by the Thompson family, each step bringing them closer to permanent home, to stability, to the new normal they were creating together. Award ceremony held in a grand hotel ballroom in Minneapolis became a community event. Nearly half of Pine Creek making the journey to witness Max's recognition. The German Shepherd accepting the attention with dignified grace, though clearly happiest when simply beside his family, particularly Zoe. His preference for quiet duty over public acclaim. Evidensimer arrived, bringing with it the completion of their new home. The moving day emotional for all of them, a sense of completion, of circle closing as they carried boxes, furniture, the accumulated donations and purchases of the past 6 months into the structure that would become their new family center, their safe place. Max explored the house carefully, methodically, his inspection thorough despite his slower pace. Each room examined, each corner sniffed, his approval evident in his relaxed posture as he finally settled in Zoe's room, in the special bed built to his measurements, positioned perfectly to allow him view of both her and the door, his guardian post. Established on youth that night as the family prepared for their first sleep in the new house, Zoe knelt beside Max's bed, her nightly ritual of reading him a story before her own bedtime unchanged from their pre-fire routine, though now taking place in a different room, a different house, and the brave knight saved the entire kingdom. She read from her favorite fairy tale book, because true courage isn't about being the strongest or the fastest. It's about doing what's right even when it's scary. She looked up at Max, who was watching her with attentive eyes. That's like you, Max, she said simply. You were scared of the fire, but you came back for me anyway because you love me. Max's tail thumped against his bed, acknowledgement. Understanding perhaps, or simply contentment at being where he belonged with his person. His charge, his Zofram, the doorway. Robert and Sarah watched the scene, their own nightly ritual observing. This moment between daughter and dog, the bond that had existed before the fire, and somehow strengthened through its trial, the relationship that had